I wanted to introduce you to now Dr. Hampton Richards, who is managing partner at Walnut Hill OB/GYN, one of our major physician partners in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, who will talk to you about his experience and how he feels this model will expand clinical trial access to his patients.
Thank you. We're already on. Well, thank you all for welcoming me to give this final presentation on Cedar and Aspen Insights. My name is Hampton Richards. I'm a practicing OBGYN in Dallas, Texas. I have a general practice. We're kind of a large group that's been around for about 50 years. We're known for high-volume obstetrics and minimally invasive gynecologic surgery. Frankly, this is my first time at the SCOPE conference. I have no experience in clinical research. I know nothing about pharmaceutical development. I'm kind of the odd man out here. If you asked me to speak about Walcher's mathematic algorithms for even a moment, I'd be horrified to have you know my level of ignorance as towards that subject matter. But as a physician, what I do have is a deep appreciation for what the biomedical industry has done to help me both treat and diagnose patients at their time of need. What I also have is a respect for the amount of time and expense which it takes to bring essential drugs to market. And trust me, that impediment is not lost on any of us who practice medicine today. I've been consulting with Aspen and Cedar for a year now because I see with absolute clarity the value that they bring to the evolution of clinical trials. This technology unlocks potential from independent practices, which previously were isolated because of their small size and relative geographic isolation, forcing them to be excluded from participation in these trials. Importantly, this technology casts an even wider net, currently across our state and eventually even the country, which is essential in identifying those unicorn patients that are harder and harder to find as trials become increasingly specific in their inclusion and exclusion criteria. I have patients in my practice who deserve to be part of this conversation, and Aspen and Cedar are able to deliver these opportunities to these women. To comprehend why this is, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I feel that as a representation of the typical independent physician, knowing my motivations, my thoughts, my priorities will give clarity as to why this novel structure is so appealing to thousands of other physicians like myself. As is common with physicians, I was raised in medicine. My grandfather was in the first graduating class at UT Southwestern. That was back in the day when that was everything from home deliveries to appendectomies. I'm also fortunate to share a practice with my father, who's still practicing medicine at the age of 71. And as you can imagine, working with a mentor like this while I was building my practice and surgical skills was truly invaluable. Our practice does maintain an affiliation with Southwestern, so I do have some opportunity to teach medical students, fellows, and residents in a surgical setting. But that involvement is far less robust than a traditional academic position. To this end, I've always lamented the loss of mentoring opportunities, which I knew would result from going into private practice, and over the past 12 years, I've looked for various ways to fill this void. I spent some time working for a board preparatory course for medical students that's offered on a digital platform. Here I served as chief editor to develop the OBGYN portion of this curriculum, and this eventually led to an expansion of my professional opportunities outside of my clinical practice to include the development of a women's health laboratory, which currently services 15% of independent OBGYNs in Texas. While I recognize these experiences are incredibly unique and personal to me, they reflect, I think, a commonality that most private practitioners are looking for. Doctors desire a community. They want to be linked back to the larger practice of medicine. They want to give back both in their clinics as well as to the community at large. I've been consulting with Aspen and Cedar for a year now because I feel that this product gives physicians exactly these opportunities. I'd like to build this up a little bit more and give you an opportunity to understand this worldview even better by going through the arc of a physician's training and practice. And I'd start by considering the position that all physicians enter their chosen profession as idealists. Without ignoring the many benefits that come from a career as a doctor, it's a life one begins with full knowledge of the long hours, physical toil, financial stress, and personal sacrifice that are necessary, at least in the early years. One cannot enter this journey if you're not motivated by a desire to give back and a belief that this investment will result in an opportunity to improve the world around you. Additionally, every doctor starts their career as a scientist, and no matter how much you may dread the Krebs cycle or feel that it will have little impact on future patient care, you still are obligated to memorize it in college if you want to move on. Medical school itself then becomes an interesting contrast between classroom and clinical. In the first 2 years, the polished and unchallengeable truth of the textbook takes hold. Everything is crisp and clean. Everything is simplified to one right answer on a multiple choice test. It's the second half then, when clinical rotations are introduced, that the messy inconveniences of individualization and imperfect knowledge are revealed. And it makes me wonder if the scientists in this room have their own version of the adage we use that patients don't always follow the textbook. And yet, these years are also essential in reinforcing that this doesn't mean we should just throw these textbooks out the window. Exemplary medical care builds from the foundation of evidence-based medicine, then individualizes decisions through the lens of a patient's unique situation and indeed her own subjective system of values and priority. This is where great doctors excel over time. The ability to realize when to apply the law of averages, as concluded by a clinical trial, versus when to step away from the evidence, with the knowledge that no study is perfect in its ability to account for every situation. This level of intimacy and analysis can only be reached through a close connection with your patient, a personal connection which is the foundation for transcendent care. As training moves into residency, the double-blind, placebo-controlled trial becomes a god of truth, cutting through myths and unveiling what was hidden. When in doubt, always follow the evidence. It's not a bad maxim to hold on to when you're getting started, but extreme incorporation of this leads to an almost cult-like analysis of the decision tree that leaves no room for thought or interpretation. When I was training in Chicago, there was the Northwestern way, and you would be hard-pressed to find someone at my hospital who was willing to stray from it. When they did, the residents would often look at each other with raised brow and the certain understanding that this attending was foolish beyond the limits of credulity. This practice of circular affirmation, resulting in its codification of beliefs, leads these young physicians with the certainty that their algorithm is the only way. There's the acceptance that evidence has changed over time, but this is countered by the illusion that you are at the end of this evolution. And then after this is cemented into place, training is over, and you get a job. But private practice is a funny thing. Years of structure, apprenticing, protocols, and supervision vanish on your first day caring for patients in the hospital. School and training are times for friendship, community, and fraternity, but when you open your practice, it's like falling into your own individual universe. You're the boss, directing your team of nurses, but without any other doctors working on your team. It's a conflicting feeling knowing that suddenly no one is looking over your shoulder. This liberation and freedom to practice as you see fit is balanced by fear and knowing that your actions may result in irreparable harm if you don't have the foresight or intuition to know when to ask for help. If I'm being candid, there's even a moment when you have the realization that you can be as bad of a doctor as you want to be. You can cut every corner, skip every duty, and prioritize yourself over your patient if you only had so poor of a moral compass as to follow these instincts. After you get past that realization, the next issue for you to struggle with is the fact that everyone is practicing medicine differently from how you were trained. Gone are the codified rituals that you took for absolute truth. In fact, running patients through those time-tested protocols of your training only seems to get whispers about you in the doctor's lounge and suspicion from the nurses. It's interesting that even with partners in your own practice, the ability to gain insight into who is a good doctor, who you would refer a friend to, and who is not, is a difficult and strangely opaque task. Almost without exception, you will never sit in an exam room and hear a colleague counsel a patient. You won't see the decisions that bring them to a recommendation or experience their bedside manner. And outside of your partners, you definitely won't see anyone operate. In fact, the best insight a physician can get into the confidence of his or her colleagues is the nurses, And anyone can just as easily call labor and delivery on a Saturday afternoon and ask whoever picks up the phone for a recommendation of a doctor in their hospital. But you figure your own practice out, you ask for help, you review cases with your partners, you're intensely thoughtful of the decisions in these early days when your copious time is balanced only by your empty waiting room. As years go by, volume increases, lessons are learned, and you internalize the sage advice of be careful what you wish for. Volume goes up. With repetition, a pattern recognition emerges, which allows you to be just as effective while still seeing that many more patients. This isn't a bad thing. You say the same speech so many times that it comes out instinctively, allowing you to counsel on autopilot about general things while at the same time your conscious mind is analyzing the things that make this patient unique. You sense when you need to slow down and when you can speed up. You cram another appointment slot into each new widget of time which your efficiency creates. The varnish fades, the job becomes a job. You love your patients and your sense of purpose, but you now look to family and hobbies to fill your free time, instead of reading the latest studies and pontificating on how to refine your practice. There's no small amount of guilt in becoming a worker who's defined by their life as opposed to their job. I'm sure this transition is healthy, but some part of you misses the excitement of the scientific adventure that led you to medicine in the first place. So then if I miss these experiences so much, why wouldn't I want to participate in clinical research after reaching this professional plateau? If my day-to-day work has reached a point of stability and ease, why not involve myself in areas of professional curiosity? Well, let's think about the current model of community-based research trials. While the structure of positioning a research coordinator internal to a busy practice certainly works for some, it clearly does not work well for all. Even a cursory statistical glance at the number of independent clinics who don't participate in clinical trials will be evidence that there are aspects of this relationship which don't fit the daily operation of most clinics. First of all, I'm working with strangers. I've either reached out to drug development companies or I've been introduced by friends, but this new relationship is already off to an unsettling start. At this point, I've become king of my castle. I've been working with my nurses and staff for years. We've grown into a mini family who share the singular purpose of focusing on patient care while maximizing efficiency in the office so we can all get out of there and get home to our real lives. And now there's an interloper in our office who has a different agenda from ours. Specifically, they are there to mine my patient base and fill studies. To this end, their primary goal is to help their organization, not necessarily to help my patients. To accomplish this, they have engaged me to sell a product to women who've put their trust in me. But now with each interaction, I'm serving dual masters. The first, agnostic, designed to be open-ended and allowing patients a wide menu of options to choose from. The other, a narrow funnel, intended to push those same women towards a single path of registering for a clinical trial. If this characterization seems overly harsh in principle, consider how it feels when you're working on a trial that is months behind its predicted recruitment. Even the most ethical of professionals feels the weighty tug of this latter pathway. I'm also conflicted at this point based on my reasons and rewards. As a generalist, I really don't have any personal motivation for guiding a patient between one decision or another. Doctors are more successful if they give great care and thus get more referrals. What that care is really doesn't matter. Now I have deliberately entered into a relationship where I am financially rewarded for filling trials with my patients. If a patient is on the fence and I can push her towards participation, I create value for myself. It's hard to understand from the outside how disruptive this paradigm shift can be for a provider. It's a fundamental change from how we have been trained and the ethos which has been imprinted on us. This leads to emotional and moral confusion. Worse for the trial, it may have a counter effect of causing us to steer some patients away from the trial as we are now confused as to what is in the patient's best interest versus what is in ours. We become even more conservative in our counseling and might offer trial participation even less. Now, let me be very careful here. It's not that I'm opposed to matching appropriate and interested women to clinical trials which are advancing science. Quite the contrary. I view it as one of the obligations which I have as a physician. But accomplishing this goal well takes time and a panoramic lens. If I have a patient base of 5,000 women, I don't want to be searching through those 20 at a time, and I don't want chance to determine who walks through my office every day. I don't want to be discussing an endometriosis trial with a woman who's come to see me for testing after her husband's infidelity. It's this friction of discongruent agendas which causes my discomfort, and the need to prioritize the time that I do have can lead to resentment towards a trial when I'm forced to choose between mourning with a mother who's experienced a loss or discussing trial enrollment in the next room. That time is not a luxury that I have during my typical work day. This emotional conflict is mirrored in my office workflow as well. The flow and muscle memory which has helped my practice evolve into a low-stress and highly efficient machine is now thrown off the rails by the research coordinator who's pulling at my sleeve, trying to focus my attention on her agenda as opposed to ours. The counseling for this side job often throws me behind for a scheduled visit, which has a domino effect on the rest of my day. Now I can't stop thinking about my waiting room, which is filling, and questioning if selfishness is impacting the respect that I have always placed on my patient's time. My anxiety grows in step with my irritation with the partner who has carved out precious space from my clinic for her charts and documents, now both emotionally and physically interrupting the zen which I took years to slowly establish. And as to those documents, I did not become a physician because I like paperwork. I enjoy my relationship with my patients, and I enjoy working with my hands. While I'm familiar with the work of a principal investigator, I've not been trained in it, nor do I have a particular interest in these responsibilities. The most direct and effective way to make a physician uncomfortable is to put them in charge of something which they don't feel competent in. Approving patients for investigative medications or interventions, clearing them from a cardiac or neurologic perspective. I don't even do this for my surgical patients. I send them for pre-op appointments with internists. Combine that with stacks of paperwork, legal responsibility, and uncertainty of outcomes, we found our way to a quick no thank you. Many practitioners who've gone down this road find within a matter of time that the juice is not worth the squeeze. Yes, there may be a fractional increase in annual income for these practices, but there's also a value that you ascribe to ease and convenience. The income most clinics accrue from trials does not compensate for this disruption. To the organizations and clinics who found a way to make this successfully work, I give a bow of congratulations. But for the dramatically larger pool of us that haven't been able to make this work, there must be another solution. So then, why am I so excited about this venture with Aspen and Cedar? Quite simply, this technology and this structure allow me to focus my practice on the specific values that I bring to clinical research while outsourcing those that I am not interested in to the experts. And essentially, all of this work is exported outside of my clinical day so that my participation is compartmentalized. There is no negative impact on my clinical staff, my time with my patients, or my priority in providing them with uncompromised care. Quite simply, my value to research organizations is in access to my patient base, as well as my relationship with those patients, translating to an ability to encourage appropriate patients to participate in appropriate studies. It is certainly not in my skills as a principal investigator, a participation which often results in frustration, both for my office as well as for the sponsor. In this model, I receive from Aspen Insights a curated and numerically ranked list of patients sourced from my EMR who qualify for each trial as it opens. I can see my entire roster of patients at once, and I'm able to review this list after office hours to determine which of these matches I feel is appropriate and would be receptive to recruitment. Importantly, I'm not limited by chance on which patients come to my office on a certain day or month or year. So I feel like I'm selecting the very best options and not pressuring myself to force women into participation who really don't fit the bill. I am able to contact these patients on my own time using lines of communication of my choosing, so I can carefully counsel her on the personal value of her participation. If a patient does indeed have an interest, I am able to refer her to a convenient, off-site location for the mechanics of the trial, while endorsing Cedar Research as a trusted team of the highest caliber, conducting their work in the appropriate setting. No more relying on practicing physicians to stand in the role of principal investigator, which we aren't skilled at and our clinics are not prepared for. On a professional level, this provides me with engagement in the scientific community, which I was previously disconnected from. It provides opportunities for my patients that they otherwise would have had to go to other practices to receive. And it brings value to my office through an affiliation with academic medicine, branding my establishment as one which emphasizes research as part of my care. In short, it rips all of the good out of the current paradigm while leaving behind all of the inconvenient and inappropriate. My feelings on this are not unique. There are many others like me. Indeed, in a community of over 500 OBGYNs with which we currently have connectivity in Texas, I've already spoken with a number of thought leaders for practices who are interested in a model just like this. Over 90% of these physicians are not participating in research and have no interest in the current model. Despite this, every single one of the doctors I've spoken with has expressed a desire to participate with Aspen and Cedar in our initial trials. They are attracted to it because of its ease. They are attracted to it because it respects the physician's time and priority on the patient in a way which has not been designed before. I'm excited for this opportunity to introduce you to a sea change in how clinical research will be conducted in independent community offices in the future. A change which brings engagement to physicians, value to patients, and success to your essential organizations. A change that will allow so many more of us to work together to advance medicine and improve healthcare. We welcome your questions. Thank you for your time and attention.